Friends, stop what you are doing. We are live on the Quorum stream with an update that has sent a jolt of genuine shock through the nation's capital. Just blocks from the White House, 2 members of the West Virginia National Guard have been shot, critically wounded, in an incident that is tragic, horrifying, and instantly, intensely political. We are still awaiting definitive word on the condition of these brave service members, but the moment the news broke, the narrative turned from tragedy to outrage. And that outrage has one singular target: President Donald Trump. You saw our headline, "Blood is on your hands, Donald." That is the scream being amplified by critics who say this tragedy is a direct, foreseeable consequence of the president's controversial decision to deploy and federalize these troops in Washington, D.C., ignoring court warnings and local outcry. The claim is explosive, and we are going to walk you through the facts that underpin it. This is more than a shooting. It is a flashpoint in a constitutional crisis. Please hit that like button, subscribe to the Quorum stream, and tell us in the comments, is this tragedy a consequence of political recklessness? To understand the claim that Trump is to blame, we have to look at a timeline. This is not a fresh deployment. Back in August, President Trump issued an order to send over 2,000 National Guard troops, including those from states like West Virginia, into D.C., citing a need to curb crime and secure federal assets. Now, that move was immediately challenged. Why? Because deploying the military for domestic law enforcement is restricted by law. And critics, including D.C. Attorney General Brian Schwalb, called it an illegal incursion and a power grab violating the city's home rule. Just last week, a federal judge actually sided with D.C. officials, ruling that Trump had exceeded his statutory authority and that the deployment was likely unlawful. The judge even tried to order a halt, though she temporarily paused the ruling to allow for the administration's appeal. That is the critical context. The troops were on the streets, near a high-security area, despite a court ruling that essentially said they shouldn't be there, exposing them to this very risk. The critics now say, "You were warned." And that brings us to the political firestorm raging right now. We aren't making up the claim that Trump is being blamed. We are simply reporting the political reality unfolding. Critics are directly connecting the shooting to the administration's actions. They argue the deployment militarized the Capitol, inflamed tensions, and put troops who are not trained for community policing into harm's way for purely political optics. Democratic leaders, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, have released statements that, while offering prayers for the injured, also contained thinly veiled indictments of the deployment strategy. Attorney General Schwalb, who filed the original lawsuit, has previously warned that this strategy risked deadly encounters between residents and military troops. When you have a court ruling against the deployment just days before tragedy strikes the very troops in question, the political opposition sees the argument as settled. They say this tragedy is the price paid for an illegal military show of force. This is why the rhetoric is so intense. As the political left levels this devastating charge, how has President Trump responded? Predictably, he has not backed down. He has doubled down. In a post on Truth Social, the president condemned the shooter, calling the perpetrator an animal who will pay a very steep price. That strong language is classic Trump, focusing on the swift and severe punishment for the individual. But here is the most controversial part of his response. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced that at the president's request, the Pentagon is ordering the immediate deployment of an additional 500 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. Think about that. A shooting occurs in the context of a controversial, possibly illegal deployment, and the response is to send more troops, directly defying the spirit of the recent federal court ruling and escalating the military presence. Critics say this proves the deployment was never about crime statistics, but about a show of federal power, regardless of the risk to the service members themselves. Tell us your thoughts below on the Quorum stream. Was sending more troops the right response, Or is this just adding fuel to an already volatile fire? So what does this tragic event mean for the future of the deployment and for the District of Columbia? The National Guard members were shot near a high-security zone, yet the motive is still unclear. We don't know if this was a random criminal act or a targeted attack stemming from the political tensions. What we do know is that the federal judge's ruling, which paused the withdrawal order until December 11th for the administration to appeal, now hangs heavy over this situation. Will this shooting be used by the administration to justify the deployment and appeal the ruling? Almost certainly. Will critics use it to demand the immediate withdrawal of all troops, saying the deployment has now resulted in military casualties? They already are. This tragedy has fundamentally changed the stakes in this constitutional battle. It is no longer about legal theory. It is about the blood spilled on the nation's capital streets. We will keep tracking this story live on the Quorum stream. Don't go anywhere. And please, if you value this breaking non-generic analysis, take a moment. Subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement is what keeps our stream running and allows us to report the full truth. We will be back with updates as soon as they come in. Thank you for watching.